Okay, Councilmember Neal, you're asking the maker and the seconder of the motion if they would consider adding a 60-day relocation provision as well as removing beaches from the definition of parks?
Just for this ordinance, yes.
I could accept the second half as a friendly amendment, but the first half I think you'd have to do as a substitute.
And who was the seconder of the motion? Okay, Councilmember Shifsky?
I mean, candidly...
Well, can I?
Hold on one second.
I mean, candidly, I'm happy to do the second one, but the 60-day, to me, would be a step backward, which we often do, but from what was passed last time, which is trying to minimize the number of facilities, this would open it back up again. But I'd be happy to take the second part if you'd like.
And Councilmember Shifsky agrees to that. Councilmember Neal?
Okay, run that by me one more time.
They're agreeable to the first part of your amendment,
The second part.
I'm sorry, the second part, the
We're agreeable
removal?
to removing the beaches.
But not to extending
The 60-day relocation.
Correct, because then that would put all of them back in play again, which I think is exactly the opposite of what the council direction was at the last time we discussed this.
Yeah, Madam Vice Mayor, before I agree to it, if the city attorney can weigh in, my understanding is that definition is in our zoning ordinance, and we may not be able to change that definition. Is that correct?
Mr. Mays, and in your answer, if you could also recall the ordinance, the sex offender registration ordinance, and our inclusion of beaches. Thank you.
Right. In the sex offender ordinance, we did include beaches for purposes of determining the buffers. There wouldn't be any problem eliminating it in this particular case as long as we had a good definition, because we wouldn't be changing the definition of parks for zoning purposes. We would just simply be excluding from the buffers beaches. The only thing that if that does move forward, I'd like clarification on is it the council's desire when they speak of beaches, are we talking about all of the Long Beach, including the beaches at Alamitos Bay, Mother's Beach, the Colorado Lagoon, just so that we're clear that they would all be removed from the definition? And that's fine. We can bring something back that mirrors that.
It was my understanding it was Alamitos Bay, but I don't know. Defer to Mr. Neal.
But that's right, because the other part is all residential and they're already excluded, correct?
Without plotting it out on a map, I wouldn't know for sure.
Specifically Alamitos Bay.
If that's the council's desire, we could remove Alamitos Bay from the definition of parks for purposes of this ordinance. We could do that.
I could go with that.
Would you wish to just have it as Alamitos Bay, or?
Yes.
Yes. Council, was that it? No. Okay. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Well, I know we've talked about this for quite a while, and I think this council is pretty clear that we support medical marijuana, but we also support protecting our neighborhoods. And I think the core issue is, are we going to act as one city and work together on this issue, or are we going to put clusters of these marijuana dispensaries in certain districts? For example, under their current proposal, I have 4. Councilmember O'Donnell, I think, has 3. Some have none, or I'd say 1 or 2. I think it's important that we work together, and I think the people deserve a vote on the record on the issue of, does this council support caps per district or not? If we don't, that's fine. If we do, then I think that's one way to protect the neighborhoods and make sure there's plenty of medical marijuana available across the city in every district. So with that, I hope we have a vote on that issue tonight, and we stop dancing around that issue. I'll make the substitute motion that we have a cap of 2 dispensaries per district, and then allow 60 days for those who have been disqualified in the lottery, either through the buffer zones or through the cap of 2 per district, to reapply for a collective. And I'd appreciate a second on the motion.
So the motion was a cap and a 60-day relocation provision. Is there a second for that motion? Motion fails for lack of a second. Councilmember O'Donnell.
Question on your motion. You have a cap of 18. Do you have a minimum? So in other words, could a district next door, could a district 8 have 2 and district 7 have 0?
Well, I'm willing to certainly have a conversation. I don't have any minimum. My idea was to keep the proposal as is, with the exception that have a cap of 2.
Well, clarify your cap.
So no district would have more than 2.
No more than 2, but not necessarily 1 or 2.
So what would happen, just to
Well,
go
it's a
through...
yes or no. Or,
Right. Well, I think it's complex. So right now, you have the people who have entered the lottery. Some have gone through, some have failed because of the buffer zones. If we had the cap of 2, then in those districts, like my district and your district, number 3 and 4 in my district would then be able to go find another place. And if there's more, for example, find a district where there's 1 right now, and then enter a lottery for that second place.
okay. So, again, would a district be, some districts would have maybe 1 facility, certainly no more than 2, but you're not mandating that each district have 2.
That's right.
That's right. I'm correct?
You're correct. It would depend on whether or not after this cap, if the other disqualified dispensaries applied.
I get where you're coming from. But then the other half of this is the 60-day program, wherein those sites that were dislocated would have a chance to then re-enter into another spot, correct? The 60-day component is probably, I'm trying to work with you here. The 60-day component is the one that I'm probably not supportive. However, the cap, I could be supportive.
Well, I'd be happy to, hear your input on it. My thought was, for example, taking my district, if collective number 3 and 4, they would be, banned after it because they violate the cap, but they could then go and look in a district in which did not have 2 already. If you'd like to have another proposal, I'm certainly willing to hear it out. But I think the idea is to have equity so that there's access to patients citywide, that we don't have certain areas, like frankly North Long Beach right now, which has 5 in the 9th district, 4 in the 7th district. I think that's inequitable. So that's why I think it should have a max of 2. That's the idea.
I see where you come from. So we would have to engage in a lottery again.
Well, it wouldn't be a brand new, only the people who entered the original lottery would be in any way eligible.
Right.
So if you've been disqualified either because you were too close to a park or because you're in a place that now has more than 2, you could then look for a site in one of the few available slots available. So it doesn't open up a whole new lottery to all new applicants in any way. It only says for those who have been disqualified, you can go in one of the districts to be up to 2.
So it would cut it down to 18. Those 18 would go in the lottery.
To a maximum of 18, that's correct. So it would reduce the number of collectives now available, especially in those districts.
I think the mayor wants a couple?
The mayor?
The mayor should get
Who we might give him to? He could have mine. Let me scratch my head on this, and we can discuss this further as the proceeding continues.
Thank you, Councilmember O'Donnell. And Councilmember Johnson, the night is young, so I think we'll have a robust discussion on this one. Councilmember Gablich.
Eric, I have a question for you, please. If we were to really throw everything out the window that's taken place so far and go back to something that was discussed initially but rejected, if we went back to capping it at 2 or even 3, which I think some people could live with, but we still had all the restrictions, how many would there be any room for any of these people to relocate? I think I'm looking at the map, and it looks like unless they're going to the airport, there's not a lot of room left. Do you know off the top of your head?
Councilmember Gablich, Vice Mayor, and members of the City Council, if you were to approve the buffers before you tonight, there are certain districts that would have limited availability for collectives to relocate in.
So would you say that we have already, based on this map and these allocations, that we've already covered the majority of the city, that there would not be other opportunities for relocation?
I wouldn't necessarily rule out other opportunities. There would be very small room for future opportunities within the districts.
And something that, I know we spoke about this earlier. I have a couple of questions, really. I'm concerned about how we came up with the term park. because not only did we now push it beyond parks that are already built or designated for park use, but we added areas that are zoned for future park use, which eliminated it from certain areas of the city. And then there's a discussion that it's about money and the refund of the money that has already been provided to the city to begin this process for those that were, involved in trying to secure one of these locations. And now we're talking about adding even more. At this point, how many people would be eligible, how many collectives would be eligible for a refund?
Councilmember Gowlich, Vice Mayor, members of the City Council, if you were to approve this ordinance as it stands tonight, potentially 11 collectives would be eligible for a potential refund.
And leaving how many existing? How many then remaining?
We would estimate to be about 21 collectives would remain in the city.
21. And so then if we were to go along with the cap, I'm going to assume that would eliminate at least, it would be more than 3, because you have none in the 5th. You have one in the 3rd. So it would reduce it even more. I think we have to do a little bit of investigating what that would mean. But I'm going to guess it would mean maybe 4 or 5 more. So now we're looking at refunding 16 more. When I asked earlier, the 11 refunds total about $180,000. And so I'm going to guess it would be more closer to the $250,000 level. And my question again is, where will the refund money come from? We're supposed to be, actually, we started a process that I think we should be honoring, whatever the process is, whether it's this or another issue completely. When you start something and in the middle of the stream you decide to change the rules by which you have outlined for everybody to play by, I call that poor sportsmanship. So.
Councilmember Neal.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. This is a really complex issue, and I see where Councilmember Johnson is going, because there's an equity issue and concerns for us in the sense that a disproportionate amount, and I've said this from the beginning, amount of these collectives end up in industrial areas, which limits those of us on the council that have those in our district. I think the intent that Mr. Johnson is trying to do is get a cap where it's more equally distributed and access for the patients is a little more equal as far as within the district. And I think there's some value to that thought. This is a really complex issue for us, but, to have five of the collectives in District 9 is, I've said it from day one. I have a challenge with that.
Councilmember Shipsky.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilwoman Gablich made a statement that went unanswered. Could staff please clarify the fact that the fees that were collected have been escrowed, segregated, they have not been used, they are not going towards our revenue stream, and that they can in fact be returned?
Councilmember Shipsky, Vice Mayor, members of the City Council, yes, the city has restricted those fees that we took in with the application process, and we are standing ready to refund those that would essentially be eliminated with these new buffers, and has a separate, unrelated to any type of revenue budget plug, if you will.
Okay, thank you.